This will have absolutely nothing to do with the coronavirus pandemic. This is about the works of Ray Bradbury. So the next book off the shelf was a vast collection of stories by Ray Bradbury. I had received this as a Christmas present years ago and never read it. Talk about prolific. I would describe Mr. Bradbury's writing as lush, verging at times on the poetic or the purple in prose. I would have to also say that Ray is not my cup of tea. I've got Joe. He's not my cup of Joe. That puts me in my usual minority, for Bradbury was enormously popular and widely celebrated as a master. From the first words of the first story, you can deduce his method. He places you in a familiar world, even a very familiar world, with many homey touches. But this is not so much a setting as it is a setup for the fireworks to come. For example, he'll take the ultimate in familiarity, the family structure, and turn it into a family of demons. And he clearly enjoys seeing how that plays out. You can feel it like an approaching thunderstorm, the darkening sky, the smell of rain, the distant booming. Then it bursts upon you, the unfamiliar menace, death. If you're going to talk about Ray Bradbury, as I am now, you're going to talk about death. Death is Ray's go-to guy. In a brief introduction to the book, he specifically singles out one story written in 1947, The Lake. He'd been writing for some time, never quite achieving the precise note he wanted to hit. This story was different. He says, at the end of an hour, the story was finished. The hair on the back of my neck was standing up, and I was in tears. I had written the first really good story of my life. He's right. It's overwrought, but effectively overwrought. In the story, he becomes the poet of death. Death is his, all right, I want to say favorite, but I will say primary subject. When the stories are not about death, a rarity, they are often comical, as if Ray is just taking a little break from the real business at hand, the serious stuff. Story after story spools out, like lovely little Twilight Zone episodes, the central character realizing that the bell is tolling, and the bell is tolling for him. Many of the stories involve this dawning and awareness of someone who doesn't get it, and then they finally do, they get it, but it is the end of something that they got. Many of the stories are constructed out of an idea, a what if, taken to an extreme. Some struck me as lame or artificial, and some were more clever. Some of the stories seemed entirely silly to me. Not comic, just silly. I don't think Ray was deliberately trying to be silly, so it was clear that he and I were sometimes at odds. Not a good sign, with so many stories to go. It was a big book. When it comes to the future, Bradbury is not optimistic. Dystopias abound. The set may change, time and space may be altered, but human behavior is the same, and death, that constant, prevails. Ray Bradbury is remembered for his novel Fahrenheit 451, and of course, I have not read that. He was prized as a writer of science fiction, but I did not see it that way, not in the stories I read. For me, he was a writer of fantasy, and I am not a fan of it. I don't know why. I never read a book about Harry Potter, and Tolkien bores the hell out of me. Many people are enchanted by fantasy. They think it's magical. I know that, but it's not for me. Additionally, because of his fascination, his obsession, no less than that, with death, Bradbury veers into horror, and that is where he finally lost me. The book was about 900 pages long, and I made it to about page 400. He was piling death story upon death story, and finally I got creeped out. I know it's not fair. The stories were not really meant to be lumped together like this, but it was too much death for me. I have a regard for death, one that is being refined every day. And with my age and this coronavirus epidemic. But with Ray pounding away at it, I had to close the book and say farewell, Ray. No more of that.